He's not my dad. I wear the cat ears normally most of the time. It's not just for you guys, so don't think I'm trying to make things fun for kids, because I don't. I've never spoken to this young of a crowd, which is really cool. So if I seem really nervous, that's why. Well, I'm bad at hiding it. Not gonna lie to a bunch of kids. So, I put this talk together because I saw there was going to be a lot of kids here, and I'm really old. I'm like 36, and yeah. And I was talking to some friends a long time ago about how things used to be before we had the internet in our house, and before we all had computers, before all of us had cell phones in our pockets that could go on the internet from anywhere that we are and tell us how to get directions to anywhere we wanted to go. Things were a lot harder back in my day. And so I put this together just to be a fun rant, just me talking about the way things used to be. It'll be somewhat educational for the kids, but not like the boring kind of educational, like the good kind of educational. Not like dad kind of educational. So it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be weird. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to clap. I really like when you guys respond to what I'm doing, so don't worry about making too much noise or anything. I'm a really noisy guy to begin with. So the technology I'm going to talk about is I went from like 1993 to about 1996. This 3-year period in which in this country we had this crazy explosion of technology. We went from the technology pretty much that our parents even used to the technology you kids use every day in a very short time period. It was a really great time to be alive. And I'm going to talk about a lot of things that were happening in between those two time periods of technology when I was about 13 years old, about 13, 14, 15 years old. I was just getting into junior high school, and this is the life we had to lead. We had to lead. And grown-ups, it's okay to laugh too. You're going to get a kick out of this. It's going to be really funny. And so it's really long, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep talking until they tell me to stop, because I know I've got like 6 hours of material here. So just start giving me the old, this guy. When you see him start doing this, I need everyone to go, boo! And then we'll be friends. There's nowhere to put my water up here. All right, I'm going to put this here. And when I accidentally kick that over, it's totally okay to laugh. Okay, so who knows what this is? A phone box. Yes. Phone box. That's what it is. Who knows what this is who hasn't watched Doctor Who? Yeah, cheaters. He knew it. She shouted like 4 answers that were all right. Oh. So these used to be everywhere. We didn't have cell phones on us. Like, we carry these everywhere. Mom and Dad carry these everywhere. When you need to make a call, it's right there. You pull it out of your pocket and make a call. We didn't have that. Like, we didn't have any kind of phones, any way on us of making that kind of communication with anyone else. If we needed to tell somebody something, and we were outside, we had to look for one of these. And they used to be everywhere. And the way they worked, they were just like a regular telephone, except you had to put money into them to make a call. And they didn't take credit cards, and they didn't take dollar bills. You had to have change on you. You had to have quarters. Who knows what quarters are? Change. You had to carry like all of this. Like, everybody had a quarter or a few dimes and some nickels, as emergency money that they kept on them. And like when your parents sent you to school, you had a quarter on you in case you had to call your parents for something to make sure that everybody was able to make a call because they cost money. Every house had a phone in it that was like attached to the wall like this, and it was only in certain rooms. Where I grew up, most of them didn't. This phone booth is actually a very famous phone booth. It's in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and what was really cool about phone booths is they had phone numbers, and you just like, okay, so you used to have to know somebody's phone number to call them. You couldn't. This is a good point. You couldn't pull your phone out and type mom and have it call mom. You had to know a 7 or sometimes a 10-digit random set of numbers for everyone that you knew that you ever needed to call. And we used to all carry around little phone books that we would write everyone's phone numbers in. And you would guard that with your life. Like if you lost that phone book, you couldn't call anybody. You couldn't call your friends anymore. You forget it. You had to wait until you saw them again, which might, and if it was like summer break, you had to wait until school started again in September before you could ask him for his phone number again because you lost it and you just weren't friends for that summer. And so, if they lived close enough, you knew where they were, you could go bug them. And we'll talk about that later because that's a whole different fun thing. Pay phones had their own phone numbers. And so if you called the payphone, it would ring. And these payphones are out in public places. And this is a real phone booth in the middle of the desert, way in the southwest, that had a real famous phone number that got around. And if you called it, it would just ring forever. And some people would just call it and let it ring and ring and ring. And every now and then there'd be a car driving past. And if the person knew about it, they'd pull over and they'd go answer the phone. And you go, hello? They don't know your call. They don't know who's calling. And now you're talking to some person who lives half a way across the country that you've never met that was driving through the deserts. And you go, hi, this is Johnny. Who's this? And that was amazing in a time before we had the internet and Facebook and all that. We had no means of meeting strangers other than going outside. So the idea of calling someone halfway across the country and just talking and you asking where they live, and then you'd never talk to that person again. They'd go back on the road. So that was a really famous phone booth for that. There was a few other ones around. Same concept. Really cool stuff. We had phones in the house, like I was saying. Whose house still has like a phone that's wired, stuck on the wall? Who knows what the phone looks like even? There's like 3. Yeah. Nobody has these phones in their house anymore. And it was usually, yeah. Yeah, right. That's where he locks himself to get away from all of them. And I didn't know if I wanted to cover that. I had one, but that's not really like 1993 stuff. But we did have one. So if you needed to call somebody, you couldn't take the phone from the wall and then go have a secret conversation in your bedroom or something. You had a wire from the phone to the wall, and you had to just stand close to the wall and have this conversation. And people would come in and out of the kitchen or wherever you were. And if you're trying to have a private conversation, you had to talk in really coded language or not really say anything obvious because you couldn't, because people were coming in and out. Some people had a telephone in their bathroom, and that was considered like the height of luxury. Like if you had a bathroom phone, you were rich, which seems like the dumbest sentence. But did you ever remember back in the day and you go to like a real rich person's house and if you're rich, everyone had one rich friend and they had that phone in the bathroom. You're like, wow, man, they got a phone in the bathroom. You could just sit on the toilet and call your friends. Which didn't seem weird to us at the time. And now it's, somebody called you and they're like, hey, don't worry, I'm on the toilet. You call me back, it's okay. We'll get to that next. So, I'll get to this in a second, I guess. So, back on the payphones, if you didn't have quarters on you, if you didn't have any money and you had to call somebody, there was a thing called collect calling. And what collect calling let you do was charge the person who answered the phone, charge the person you called the cost of the phone call. And it was actually, they would charge them a lot more for no reason, just for the convenience. But the person on the other end, when they would pick it up, they would say, you have a collect call from Johnny. Would you like to accept the charges? And if you said yes, you got charged like $1.50 instead of $0.25, which was ridiculous. And so a lot of people didn't like to do that. Oh, and when you would call, it would ask you what your name is, and you would say Johnny. So then it would tell the other person, you have a collect call from Johnny. Would you accept the charges? And so a lot of people didn't want to pay that. And so, so what we would do is, like, if mom needed to pick me up because I was done with band practice and I didn't have $0.25, I would call to mom, and I'm going to go, please state your name, and I would go, hey mom, I'm done with band practice, pick me up. And so what would happen is mom would get the phone on the other one and it would go, hello, you have a collect call from Mom, I'm done with band practice, come pick me up. Do you accept the charges? And mom would go, nope, and hang the phone up and go pick you up. And that's how we would get free phone calls through the old collect call system. So what does that tell you about making phone calls back in the day when it had to ask you your name so it could tell the other person who was calling? How else would they know who was calling? Good answer. They wouldn't. So if you called somebody else's phone, and this is before caller ID, which some of you may be familiar with, if you called somebody else's phone, they didn't know who was calling. It just rang, and you'd go, I wonder who that is. And you would answer and find out. Because there was no way of knowing who was calling, there was a big problem with we called prank phone calls or crank phone calls, where someone would call your house, and you go, hello, and they'd go, hi, I'm just checking to see if your refrigerator's running. And you'd check your refrigerator, and you go, yeah, refrigerator's running, and then they'd go, well, you better go catch it, and then they'd hang up. And that's a joke, because the refrigerator's running. That's the right amount of laugh. Yeah. And they would range from that silly of a joke to horribly in-depth, dangerous. People would call and say, hey, so-and-so's died, you have to get to the hospital, and you'd freak out and get to the hospital and everyone's fine. But it was running rampant like that because nobody knew who was calling. Who remembers what The Simpsons is? Only the grown-ups. I know it's still running. That was the inherent humor in the question. So they still do the Bart prank calling Moe's Tavern gag on The Simpsons. And I always wondered, like, do people know what's going on there? Don't people question, like, well, how does Moe not know who's calling? He's got the caller ID. It's right there. And then, how does Moe not know who's calling? It's the same kid who's been calling for 30 years. It's probably figured it out by now. We used to have, so if you weren't home and someone needed to get a hold of you, how would they do that? Generally they wouldn't. We had certain important people, eventually, like doctors, etc., people who needed to rush back to the hospital or what have you, had a thing called a pager. And the pager was a thing that it was about this size, and originally they were way bigger. You just clipped it to your belt and you just carried it around with you. And somebody would call it to page you. And it would just beep. It would just go beep, 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 and it would just beep. And so you said, okay. And then that's all it did. And then what you had to do after your pager beeped is you had to go find a payphone. You had to drive all over or run to wherever and figure out where a payphone even was, because they weren't always in the same place. There wasn't one like on every street corner and you just go down, here's a payphone. You had to find a payphone, hope you had a quarter to put in the payphone, and that first quarter was just to call your paging company and ask them who called, who paged you, and then it would tell you. And then you put in another quarter to call the phone number that they gave you, just to see who was calling. Or they had more expensive services that would connect you through directly. But the vast majority of us, if you weren't home, you didn't get to talk to anybody. Like, if they called, you weren't home. You didn't know they were trying to call you. You didn't know what they had to say. And adversely, they just said, okay, I'll try back later. They didn't get all freaked out that they can't get a hold of you like we do now. Like if somebody doesn't answer their cell phone, they go, oh my, something's wrong. He must be hurt. So no, he's not home. We'll try later, I guess. We'll see what happens. Yeah, they could actually be having a problem. And you would just go, he's probably fine. He's probably sleeping. He's taking a nap on the floor. Eventually we did have things called answering machines, and these were super fun. Answering machines were like a tape recorder. This is a really hard talk to give. Yeah, right. Yeah. Says the oldest guy in the room. Anyone else want to heckle me? So, we had a machine that could record a phone call automatically that came into your house for about 30 seconds or so. So someone would call, it would ring a bunch of times. You guys know what voicemail is, right? Kind of, more or less. Yeah, okay. So it would call your house, and this machine that you plugged into the phone and you ran all kinds of wires into, and this big box you sat on the kitchen counter, would answer the phone, and it would play a message to whoever called, letting them know whose house it was. But you would record that message, and some people would like sing songs and do awful rap battles. And man, just your outgoing message on your answering machine was what defined you as a person. Like, that's who you were. Like, when you called that person's house, like, and whoever had the coolest message on their answering machine, Dave. My outgoing message, I was going to tell you what it used to be. Okay, my outgoing message used to be, and this is what people would hear when they would call my house. The answering machine would pick up, and then you would hear this ocean of metal, and I mean actually not like heavy metal music. I mean metal objects, and it sounds like somebody's pouring a massive bucket of metal objects on top of the phone for like ever, just as whoosh, just metal clinking and pouring. And after a few seconds, it kind of tinkers out, and it goes tink, 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 and then it kind of sounds like coins rolling on the floor. And then I go, this is the sound of all the money that I have. And then it beeps. And what it was is I had a big water bottle, like you know in the water coolers, like the big water bottle on top of them. I would put all my spare change in there, and I had it about half full of money. And I just poured it on my phone. And it was the sound of all the money that I have. And it would beep. And there was a terrible outgoing message because two things would happen. One, people would constantly call my house to hear the message. And if you answered, they'd get mad at you. You go, I wanted to hear the message. Oh, so, all right. And you hang up the phone. Sorry, man. And then you'd have to let the phone ring and then let the thing play. And then the other problem was when I would come home and check my answering machine to see who had called and left me messages, all it is just people laughing hysterically. Call after call after. I had no idea who called me because all they do is just laugh and hang up. Yeah, so I got started as a comedian. I'm like, I guess I'm really funny. Oh man, I'll get to that in a second. So what would it be now? I don't even have it out. No. Johnny Con 2010, leave it, beep. If you were making a call and nobody answered, you didn't get freaked out and think it was an emergency. Like you just left it up to them to call 911. You're like, if there's an emergency, they'll call the police. It's fine. We talked about pages a bit. If you wanted to talk to your friend and say you didn't have their phone number or you weren't near a phone, and it was after school or in the summer, weather's nice, you're outside, you just walked to their house. And you would walk 2 miles. You would walk 2 miles to your friend's house just to see if they're home. Yeah, I don't want to throw a physics conundrum. I was about to. You would walk like 2 miles to your friend's house to see if he was home. And then it's not like your friend answered the door usually. Usually one of their parents would answer the door. And so then you had to ask if so-and-so was home. And they'd want to get into a conversation with you. But, oh, how are you? How have you been? And you don't want to talk to some grown-up about how you're doing. You're just looking to see if Pete's home. And it was, sometimes you'd go to their house and they were grounded. Who's been grounded before? Do parents ground kids anymore? Because I don't think so, because you got a bunch of... Yeah. So sometimes you go to their house and they're grounded and they can't come outside and play. They can't come to the door. And their parents would yell at you like you were part of it. You go, oh, hey, can Pete come outside and play? And they go, no, Pete's grounded because he didn't come home on time last night. And then you're on this person's porch and you're like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And then you don't know what to do. That happened to me all the time. I had a lot of friends that were grounded all the time. I was grounded all the time. And yeah, and your mom would yell at you, and you're like, I don't know what to do. Sometimes you would, and this is going to sound really weird, and it is really weird, and it's creepy to do today, but back in the day, if you had like a girl or a boy that you liked, you would go hang out around like near their house to see if they would come home, and then you could catch them and talk to them, which is really weird these days. Right. Now it's called stalking, and like there's paperwork. It's if you had a girl or boy you liked and you got their phone number, like today, if you get someone's phone number, generally when you're of the dating age, they have a cell phone. You get their phone number, you call their cell phone, they answer their cell phone. Or really, I'm sorry, no, nobody calls anymore. You text them, and then they text you back, like, and nobody uses words. It's all the emoticons. So you send like a heart, moon emoticon, and I actually don't know how it works. I'm just guessing now. You send a bunch of, yeah. So back in those days, we used to make phone calls. There was no texting. It was, you called and you had a conversation. You would punch in their number in your phone, and it would ring. Yeah, no, you wouldn't punch. It was more like, we called it punching. We did. You dial their number, and it would ring, and you would start sweating because you're hoping this person you like is going to answer the phone. And then if they were going to, you still didn't know what you were going to say. And usually, one of their parents answers the phone. So now you're calling this girl or this boy you like, and her dad answers the phone. And so here's this boy on the end of the phone going, can I talk to Erica, please? Who's this? Johnny? Johnny what? And this is how it went. Because her dad knew there's only one reason there's a boy calling this house. And he didn't want nothing to do with it. And usually if the dad answered, you just hung the phone up. Why? Because he didn't know who was calling. Try again later. Sometimes you try again right away. Try again right, see if she answers. You do it 3 times. And the 3rd time the dad answered, you learned some new words. You guys having a good time? Am I being kind of entertaining? I'm trying to... Huh? Oh, I know. He's going to fall out of his chair. His kid's dying. Yeah, and if you had friends who lived in another town or like cousins you like to hang out with or something, forget it. They may have as well have lived on a different planet. They were just a kid you knew one time. And it's just, I don't know, you'd see them at Christmas sometime. Holidays were really exciting because who has cousins that are like friends to them? Who likes hanging out with their cousins? Yeah. Who brought them here? Yeah. Cousins are really cool because they're always people who are our age, and so they like the same stuff that we like because we're from the same kind of family. So they're like friends to us, but usually, a lot of times your cousins live really far away. You don't see them that often. And so like family holidays like Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, or sometimes a birthday, were really cool because the really cool cousins that you liked would all come hang out and you'd all be together. And it would cause a ton of trouble for all of the grown-ups at this party. And just be generally annoying. Who's familiar with the concept of the kids' table? Who knows the kids' table? Sit at the kids' table at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm gonna give it away. Do you know why there's a kids' table? So you can all just keep an eye on each other and stay over there so we don't gotta listen to you. And why is that? Because all the stuff you think is cool, we don't. Because we have just completely lost track of what's cool anymore. And we're like, I don't know what they're talking about. Just put them over there. I give up. I don't know. And so, not only did we not have cell phones that we carried around with us, in general, we had a lack of access to the internet. Not just from our phones, but at that time, the majority of us didn't even have a computer in the house. Just no computer. Who knows how I type my reports for school? Not you. One of you. A typewriter. Who knows what a typewriter is? All right, that's cool. Okay. Yeah, it's like a stamp. Yeah. It's got ink and a stamp. It's like a printer with buttons that works like a stamp. Yes. Yeah, and if you messed up, if you typed the wrong button, if you were early enough in the page, you just throw the paper out. And you throw it out and start over. If you were way deep into it, who knows what whiteout is? That's interesting. Why do these kids know what whiteout is, Dave? So, all right. So whiteout was like little white. It was like white ink, and you'd have to paste it just over the one letter that you messed up. Because it wasn't the same color white as the paper, so that people would know if you actually use whiteout. So you have to do it real small, and then you'd have to line the typewriter back up so it would. But you have to wait for it to dry. So you'd have to type it, and then you'd have to go. You blow on it, and then you poke it to see if it's dry, and then it's not, and now you got a big thumbprint on your paper. And then you'd have to line the typewriter back up so you could get the letter back right on where that whiteout was, and that never works. And you got this E that's like half an inch above everything else, and You got an E on top of a thumbprint, and you got to give this to your teacher. And it was just the absolute worst. So aside from that, we didn't have even just general internet access. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have text messaging. We didn't have instant messaging. We went all day in school without knowing what our friends were doing. We didn't know Jimmy had a canker sore until like 5 o'clock. We just went all day without texting garbage to each other. And that seemed fine. It all worked out. We didn't need this constant communication, this constant connection. Those notes were important though. So he's right. We used to pass notes in class where you would write a note to somebody and you would fold it up a certain way. And there was this agreed upon process in the whole classroom where you wrote a note and you handed it to somebody and you wrote whose name it was for on it. And you handed it to somebody who would pass it to the next person in line in the direction where that person was. Nobody would steal it. Nobody would open it. This was an agreed upon social standard. You passed the note. And the notes, like, you had a whole page of paper, and if you didn't fill that, oh man, no, we would fill this page of paper. We would write a note. Or towards the end, it kind of got down to that, like, do you like me? Yes or no? And so they did this circle yes or no things. And so what that person would have to do is circle yes or no. Hold it up. And pass it back. And you couldn't let the teachers see it. And the teacher always saw. He had to pass his note secretly all the way back. With what, Cheetos? All right. So when, also because we didn't have like calendars and stuff on our phones to keep track of all of our important appointments when we were 13, we kept like, usually the phone books we had would have like a personal calendar in it and you write your important dates in there. Or really, for the most part, you just remembered them. We just remembered when we had to go do things. Like, oh, I gotta go to the doctor on Thursday. We just remembered things. It's amazing. I can't remember anything now. I got to put every single thing in my phone calendar. Before I had a phone calendar, gosh, never had a problem. Always worked out fine. One other thing we didn't have was, yeah. Oh, we certainly did not. No, that sounds awful. I would never start that because that means it's going to happen back to me. And I don't want pens flying at my face. You should probably change schools. Oh, man. I was trying not to tell kids how to make weapons in this talk. Yeah, it happened. We all had the Anarchist Cookbook. So, one other thing we didn't have with the lack of internet was Google Maps. And Google Maps provides two really good services. One is it tells you how to get from point A to point B really quick on your phone even. B, it tells you what traffic looks like and if there's construction somewhere. It tells you if it's going to take longer because there's a lot of people on the road. And we didn't have that. So whenever we had to leave for somewhere that was more than 15 or 20 minutes away, you just left forever early. You left like 45 minutes early in case there was traffic, and if there wasn't, you just got there early. And then you just waited. You didn't have Game Boy. You didn't have nothing. You had Highlights magazines. If you're going to the doctor, you just had old Highlights magazines where everybody's solved all the puzzles already. and the dumb baby toys in the waiting room, and it was just the worst because I was like 23. And so we didn't have Google Maps. What we had was regular maps. And we just called it maps. It was just a map. And a map was a thing that it was like the size of this. It was like this big. And you bought it from a gas station. And when you bought it from the gas station, it was like this big. And then what you would do is you'd unfold it in the car while you're driving, and while fighting with whoever you're in the car with, and they'd open it up, and you get this big thing like that. And then that was fine, and you'd have to look on it, and there's this just massive map of like roads that just go everywhere. And you have to figure out where you are first, because it doesn't tell you, it's a piece of paper. You have to look at this thing, and you're like, where are we? And so you'd have to look at like the streets you're passing, and then find that street name on this massive map, and it's like this big. It's like a word search. It's like the world's dumbest word search. You have to find this little Chestnut Boulevard on a map that's like this big, covered in road names. And then once you found it, and you'd have to go, okay, we need to go straight this way and turn right here. And you'd have to remember all this because nobody ever wrote it down. And for no reason. And then you'd have to get the map back into the glove compartment. And then to do that, what you did is you started to fold it a little, and then you just fold it up. And then you never touched it ever again. You went and bought a new one. That's how terrible they were. And you didn't have maps that showed you the entire country. So if you were going on like a road trip, if you're going many, many states away, you could either, and I'll walk you through like the three phases that it was like when I was a kid. One, you could either buy a map for each area you were in. As your map ended, you'd stop at a gas station and get the new one. And then you have this big stack of maps in your glove box. Or right about 95, 96, we had a thing called MapQuest. And it's still around. I think it's still around. And yeah, and so MapQuest was like Google Maps. It's a similar thing. It was the best at the time. It was the greatest thing ever. And you tell it where you're at and where you're going, and it will plot a course. And so you'd have this on your screen, this whole course and directions and maps so how did you get that into your car when we didn't have a laptop and we didn't have a phone? How did you get what was this on the screen into your car? We would print it. And so all it would print out is just a big list of directions. Just a bunch of directions, and then on the side it had these tiny little maps that were like this big. And that was the maps you had to use. And every like few directions it gave you a little map and it'd show you like 2 streets every time there's a turn. What? No. Yeah. Yeah. So it was like a bunch like taped together? Or oh, and they would just highlight the route. Oh! So it was like a book, and when you got to the edge of the map on that page, you just flip the page, and then you go, oh, you're going to go down, and then, yeah, while you're driving, you have to read a book, and wow, I never saw that. Oh yeah, and especially when you're on the side streets, if your map is 2 years old, it was wrong. Forget it. And you'd get lost inevitably, and then what you'd have to do is look for a gas station and ask the person in there, how do I get to whatever the street I'm trying to be at? And they didn't know. A lot of times they'd give you fake directions. They would inevitably tell you, you can't get there from here. You got to go back that way about an hour, turn right on this turnpike. And oftentimes they were lying. Yeah, right. From here? Yeah, there was just this weird, constant conversation we had. Did I switch that? Hang on. All right. Who knows what this is? You guys got to move. You blend in with the kids. You can't do this. Who saw me do that? Nobody. All right, so how do you guys get your music now? Hang on, you. On your phone, you just download it? Your iPhone, YouTube. All right, that's what I thought. I'm honestly asking. I don't know how kids get music these days. Sure. So back in the day, like I said, we didn't have phones. We couldn't download this stuff. We used to get our songs on these things called CDs. You probably know what CDs are, at least. You know what these are? Yeah, right. That's how mommies and daddies listen to music. No, CDs. So CDs looked like DVDs. They're the same size, but instead of movies on them, they had music. And they had like 10 songs on them. Generally, it was like 10 songs from one band. And you'd buy it, and it was all 10 songs from one band. And most of the time, only like 3 of them were any good. 3 of the songs. And so you had to be like really picky about which one you bought, because you'd spend a lot of money on one, and if there was only like 3 good songs on there, you were mad. That cost a lot of money. Yeah. And so we had these services. Yeah, CDs were really expensive. They were like $20 at the time. We had these services called Columbia House, and what was the other one? BMG. And you would fill out a whole set of they would tell you, here's all the CDs we got, and you would check the boxes for the ones you want, or write down the number, and you'd mail this form in the mail, and you would just wait for like ever, until you forgot that you ever ordered anything. And then a package would come in, and you go, what is this? And you go, oh, it's the CDs I ordered! And you open them, and it's like all your favorite bands, and it's a bunch of music, and you just get excited, and you go in your room, and you put the CD in, and you turn up like really loud, and your parents just get mad. And, well, my parents would get mad. And what my mom used to do is when that box would show up, she'd hide it. She would hide it until the weekend when she knew she was going to be out of the house. Because I would put it every time, just go in my room and just crank it up. And yeah! And oh, she hated my music. Whose parents hate their music? Good, you're doing it right. Hey, I turned out okay. My parents hated my music. That's all I'm saying. We had to order these in the mail if you wanted to get them cheap enough. And so, yeah, that worked out well for in your house. But what if you wanted to listen to that CD when you were outside? When you're walking around, you're going for a jog, when people used to exercise. The giant gray thing that was on the slide you already saw? This kid's smart. Look at that. Psychic. You should be up here talking. I feel like someone's recently had a death in the family. It was you. All right. So we had these things, and this is a CD player, and it was about the size of a CD, which meant that it doesn't fit. It was too big to fit in your pocket. It didn't fit. So you had to walk around with this CD player, and you just hold it in your hand. You had your big headphones on, and so if you wanted to listen to music, this was you. You had to just walking around the street with your arm getting tired, and just. I'm getting to it. So these worked by having a disc that spins in a circle, and there's a little laser that reads information off the disc, and the disc had to be perfectly perpendicular to the laser. So if you moved at all while holding that thing, the disc would wobble, and it doesn't read. It skips. It can't read it, and your music stops for like 3 whole seconds. You just get silence. And then it comes back really loud because that's how you were listening to it. And it's just the worst. And so you had to walk around and just be really careful. You couldn't jog with them at all. Eventually, they came up with ones that had a technology they called skip protection. And I won't get into how it worked because it's boring. But it's... Oh, you're right. Somebody made a holder for the CD thing with a bunch of like springs in it, and you would put the CD in there, and it would stay flat as you bounced around. But then you had this big thing you carried around that was bigger than that. Forget putting it in your pocket. And so somebody made electronic skip protection, ESP, so we're back to the psychic thing again. And it killed your batteries instantly. So you could listen to like maybe 4 songs on this thing, and then your batteries are dead. And then you just have this big thing. You still have to carry around with you because it doesn't fit in your pocket, but now it also doesn't do anything because the batteries are dead. So now you're just this idiot walking around with this. There we go. Dave's got it. Everybody say boo to the guy telling me my time's almost up. All right. All right. So who's big into gaming? I'll do a real quick bet on this. Who's a gamer? Gamers, like video games? Oh. So, there you go, guys. Sir. All right. I'm just going to go out on this one. How many of you kids have seen this stream here? Where? On at home? On a really old computer. All right. Yeah. So we used to, when the internet first came out, how do you even explain this? I knew that would get 50 people yelling. So. Yeah, what? It was. We had to use remember the telephone lines from the beginning? We had a banana phone. We used to have to use the telephone line, and you'd plug it into your computer, and your computer would literally call the internet through the telephone line, and it was really slow. Who remembers Fred Durst? And it was really slow. So, back then, the idea of playing games like World of Warcraft and Minecraft, where you have 400 people playing on the same server at the same time, was absolutely impossible. It could not happen. It wasn't even made yet. That's valid. That's valid. What's in here? So that's absolutely true. Can I get a witness for doom? So we had one of the things we had that could play multiplayer, and I'm talking like 4 players, was this game called Doom. And it was just a run around and shoot people kind of game. And this game was so good. This game was so good that when you played online with 4 players, it didn't work. It was too slow. It wouldn't respond fast enough. You get killed half the time because just connecting to the internet was a slow process, and it didn't work. And it was so good that we still played the heck out of it every day, all the time, and just dealt with how slow and buggy it was from that. Yeah, I didn't want to get into that. But yeah, yes, you're absolutely right. Where it would send all of the data in the full stream. Oh, yeah. Maybe. I can't remember, but all right. Yeah, so you couldn't even actually... because you wouldn't play it with a mouse. You didn't play this game with like mouse and keyboard. There was no mouse. Well, you could. Yeah. You could if you wanted to, but most of us didn't. Because there was no up and down. It was just, you faced the monster you wanted to shoot, and you pushed the shoot key and it shot. There was no headshot. There was not, you gotta shoot him in the legs. No, nope, you just...
Oh, so it moved it for you?
It was... It didn't care in the first place. Yeah. And one last thing, and then I think this is a good intro into today. Grown-ups, who knows what this is? Right? Weird thing, right? None of us had this. But this was a really cool thing. Who remembers Blockbuster? Blockbuster Video, right? I believe it is now extinct. Blockbuster rented this. X-Band got a really good deal with Blockbuster to put this in all their stores. And what this was the first online gaming lobby system. You know, like the lobby when you first get onto Xbox and everybody's hanging out before you're actually playing the game and calling each other bad names? Yes, exactly like that. Yeah, you guys know words I don't know. So the way this worked is you had, who knows what this is? This thing, just in general, what's the word for that? It's a game cartridge. Okay, cool. So that's a cartridge. And so when you wanted to play a video game, I guess now you put discs in, but it was like that. That was like your disc. And so this would go into your video game system, and then you'd plug the game into the top of it, and you would plug your telephone cord into here. And when you turn your system on, it asks you for a phone number to call to get into the internet. And long story short, you give it that. And it would dial into an X-band server. And it would say, you can give it a little screen name or whatever, and it would say what game you're playing. Whatever game you wanted to play with other people, like everyone had to have that game. And they had to plug it in. So it's like, and you had to have it plugged in. And say most games on the Super Nintendo were 2-player. And 2-player local, like you both had in the same place. This was the first one that allowed you to play console video games, multiplayer, over the internet. So player 2, if he also had X-Band, was connected to the internet. And still was just one guy with a Super Nintendo. And you could play that way. And this never took off. But I thought it was really significant because this really was the first console online gaming system. It had a lobby system. Before you play the game, it could show you everyone else who's also playing that game, and you could find someone to play with and talk to them and get online. And from there, we've got what we have now. So that's all the time I got for you guys. I hope it was fun and weird. Did you guys like it? Is that cool?